Lil Mosey is a name that you probably haven't heard in a couple years, and there's really no reason for that because with the way his career was going through 2018 to 2020, it was looking like he was going to be at the top of the rap game in no time. But one big factor came and destroyed his entire career and basically left him stagnant throughout the 2020s. This isn't an artist that ever should have fallen off. He actually would drop music consistently. He was getting bigger and bigger as the years went on. People were really rocking with what he was doing, and he was getting big time features and even appearing in movie soundtracks. But unfortunately, at this point, all of his music, all of his accolades, and everything he did during his career has now been overshadowed by this case that he caught in 2021. Before we look at how it all got torn down, let's look at how he got to fame in the first place when we look over the entire story of Lil Mosey. Oh yeah, and real quick before we get into it, want to shout out my patrons right here. I'm going to say their names at the end of the video, so if you're interested in that, stick around to the end, but for now, let's get into it. Lathan Stanley Moses Eccles was born January 25th, 2002 in Seattle, Washington, being the youngest boy in his family with two older brothers. During his younger years, he was your average kid, playing football in middle school before then picking up basketball in high school, although neither of these hobbies really kept his attention for too long because Mosey was the type of kid that would get bored with things very easily. And of course, if sports weren't going to keep his interest, there was absolutely no way that school would, with him finding the day-to-day grind very mundane and always looking for that new exciting thing to do to take away his boredom. Now, of course, when he was growing up, he would listen to all the average mainstream rappers that were out at the time, but it wasn't until his older brother stole his iPod and put an album on it called Dreams and Nightmares by Meek Mill that he truly fell in love with the genre. There was something about Meek's delivery that really infatuated Lil Mosey, and after that, he knew he wanted to be a rapper too. Although when listening to Lil Mosey's music, you would never be able to tell that it was inspired by Meek Mill because it's a lot more melodic and similar to Drake if you had to compare it to anybody, but definitely sounds nothing like what Meek Mill was putting out at the time. Mosey would get his start in the world of rap by creating a SoundCloud account in 2016, as well as using Bandcamp to mix and master most of his vocals while also using YouTube Beats. So basically all the internet stuff that most rappers were using around the time. Now, a lot of Lil Mosey's really early stuff is no longer up. Like most rappers, he would delete it as time went on after he became embarrassed by it, but we do know his first ever track was called Ice, and his second ever track was called Duplicate, which was actually recorded over a remake of the instrumental for Panda by Designer, which was a hit song during 2015. If you didn't know, I think most people do, but just saying.
Thinking about my money, yeah, this ain't enough. 50s in my mattress, getting way too rough. Coming up, yeah, it's getting way too tough.
Because of that song's popularity, the remix by Mosey would go on to get 1,000 plays on SoundCloud, inspiring him to keep creating music as he saw a chance to actually make it. And he believed in himself so heavily that he would actually pay to perform in the local area. That's right, he actually had to give money to promoters to get a little bit of stage time and perform one or two songs. And by all accounts nowadays, a lot of people would look at this as corny, having to pay to get up on stage and get your music heard. When you're an artist, you always got to bet on yourself and invest in yourself, so spending a little bit of money actually paid off in the long run because he managed to get entered into a competition called Coast to Coast Live, where he managed to score 4th place for the hottest new artist coming up in the area at the time. A pretty solid accolade for a 15-year-old kid, I gotta say. And through these live shows, he would eventually meet another artist named Kari Cash, who was a little bit older than him and would show him the ropes of the rap game, how to move right, and how to not get fucked over and scammed. He was a day one homie to Lil Mosey, as well as a mentor that would make sure to put him in the best spots for him to be the most successful he possibly could be, allowing him to join his rap group known as Band Kids, with Mosey changing his name from Little Mosey over to Band Kid Mosey, as well as getting him connected to a producer known as Royce David, who actually had a professional studio that Little Mosey could record at, which put him leagues ahead of the competition because at the age of 15, there's not a whole lot of kids who can get into a professional studio and have an actual producer make beats for them to rap on, so Mosey was definitely in a good spot to blow up. And once again, I gotta say, it's all because he invested in himself. He spent the money to go perform at those shows, made the connections, and was able to get that professional studio that would give him a more clear and clean sound that would help him eventually blow up. And he would immediately get to work on his first song that would really start to do numbers on SoundCloud called Off-White, which he recorded in under 15 minutes after hearing the beat for the first time, and as soon as he posted it up, it got 30k views in a week. And after he seen how well that first track was doing, he would immediately hop back in the studio and record his next track, So Bad, which he released in December 2016, before then dropping tracks all throughout 2017, including Skirt Off Freestyle, Been On, Too Paid, and Lame Shit, which actually got a music video where you can see Lil Mosey for the first time, where he looks like he's about 12 years old, but either way, he was willing to put himself out there, and it was all paying off with him getting more and more views every time he dropped. after he dropped all those singles, he would get to work on his first official mixtape called North's Best, which is not to be confused with the 2018 version of North Best that he dropped after he got signed. And it was the priorly released track So Bad that ended up doing the most numbers on this project and really putting him in a good position to drop his real breakthrough hit, Pull Up, which would immediately get 100K plays on SoundCloud, with him telling his mother if he dropped a music video for the track and it hit 30K on that platform as well, he was going to drop out of school. And Mosey had a plan to get this done because unlike his priorly released music video for Lame Shit that he put out on his personal YouTube channel, he wanted to make sure the music video for Pull Up would get the most amount of eyes on it possible, with him pulling together all his money to make it a lot more professional and also getting it released on Elevator. Now back in the day you had to pay big money to get on Elevator, but Lil Mosey was so determined to get on there that he would constantly comment on their page, go to their website and email them non-stop until eventually the owner of the website actually noticed him and decided to drop the video the very same day. And of course once it dropped on there, it immediately started doing numbers, probably down to the fact that he was so young and the spectacle of a kid that was 15 years old smoking weed, playing around with guns and sipping walk was so weird at the time. I mean, don't get me wrong, we already had Lil Pump at this point, but he was doing all that stuff when he was 16 and Lil Mosey was a whole year younger, so the spectacle was still there. I mean, at this point in 2024, the trend has definitely gone too far because we got Lil RT at the age of 9 going into strip clubs, dancing with grown women and rapping about killing people, but at the time, 15 was pretty young. But nowadays, you gotta be like 5 years old when you get into rapping. If you're any older than that, you're already washed up and you missed your chance, sorry to tell you. Even though the video did so well on YouTube, his mother still wouldn't let him drop out of school, saying that she wanted him to be a normal kid and pursue rapping once he was older, but Mosey wouldn't listen. Because he was only growing bigger and bigger, getting more opportunities, and of course labels were after him to sign him to a big time deal. And after he opened up for Lil Xan on the Heartbreak Soldier tour when he came to Washington, he knew that he had to get to LA and really make a go at this rap shit. And he would get that opportunity when Royce David decided that he was going to move to LA to try to make his way as a producer there, bringing Lil Mosey along with him, who would immediately sign a deal with the biggest record company he could think of, Interscope Records. And he would also sign to the same management as Smoke Perp, which of course positioned him alongside him in early 2018, meaning that he not only had a co-sign from Lil Xan, one of the biggest rappers at the time during late 2017, but also a co-sign from Smoke Perp, which at the time was a pretty big deal. And with all those connections made in the industry, it was time for his label to blow him up into the mainstream as the next big upcoming rapper at only the age of 16. They started off by getting him a music video for Booth Pack on World Star Hip Hop, followed up by an exposed video on No Jumper, before then getting him a Genius interview for Pull Up where he would show the world his personality for the first time. And honestly, I feel like it was a really smart idea for them to slowly build him up, introduce him to the underground SoundCloud wave, and drop video after video instead of just dropping one big video and massive song that would blow him up into the mainstream almost overnight, because a lot of people end up rejecting that, seeing it as somebody who doesn't really belong. That's basically what happened to artists like Ian Dior, Kid Laroi, and 24K Golden, where they blew up so fast that the hip-hop community didn't really accept them, and they instead found their audience with the pop crowd, which, don't get me wrong, isn't a bad thing, but it's definitely hard to stay relevant within the pop sphere because there's so many bigger artists around there that when you're the new kid on the block, if you don't have an audience already built up from another genre, you're gonna have a hard time really continuing to keep your relevance. But Mosey didn't have to worry about that. He already had a lot of motion in the underground before he dropped his first big hit called Noticed, which was actually a priorly released track that he would remix and redo, with Royce David reproducing the track and getting it ready for a mainstream release, with it finally coming out in the summer of 2018 alongside a Lyrical Lemonade video that would immediately blow up, getting millions of views before then getting tens of millions of views before then getting hundreds of millions of views. This video hit at the perfect time, not too long after Juice WRLD put out Lucid Dreams, which of course is the biggest video to ever drop on Lyrical Lemonade as of the time of recording this. It almost sits at 1 billion views. So of course releasing a similarly melodic track on the same channel a couple months after Lucid Dreams came out made sure that the track was going to be a hit, and it now sits at over 300 million views on the channel, and it's still one of the biggest videos on the channel altogether. And with Juice WRLD and Lil Mosey being the two biggest upcoming artists at the time, they would immediately go on a tour together across Europe, which of course would introduce Mosey to a whole new audience. It's kind of crazy to think because I always felt like Lil Mosey came out a little bit after Juice WRLD, but I guess since he was so young, it came across that he was a smaller artist than Juice, but at the time they were both on a very similar level. And as he went on this tour, the track would keep going up the Billboard, eventually peaking at number 80, before he then performed at Rolling Loud in 2018, before finishing off the year by putting out his first official label-backed mixtape called North's Best. I'm not really sure why he named it the exact same thing as his prior mixtape, but either way it ended up being pretty successful. It sold 21K first week, which isn't too bad for a new artist, as well as including a feature from Blockboy JB, who was a really hot artist at the time, time being an XXL freshman of 2018, before then falling off harder than any artist I've ever seen, except for maybe Designer. I guess that would be the only competition. And it also had another track on it called Kamikaze, which came out a little bit before the album dropped, getting a Lyrical Lemonade video that ran up 80 million views, as well as debuting on the Billboard Hot 100 at number 96, which is kind of low, but it still made it. His music output throughout 2018 was kind of slow, but I feel like that's because he was mostly on tour, recording vlogs while he was out there and trying to run up his bag in that way, so 2019 would be the year that he would really start dropping a lot of music. However, even with 2018 being a life-changing year that really put him on, there was also a downside because his day one homie and mentor, Curry Cash, would end up passing away from a drug overdose, which you would think would scare Little Mosey away from the drugs, but unfortunately he would continue to pop and sip for the coming years, which of course, as we already know from the countless videos I did before, is never a good idea. Drug use is always going to hurt your career in one way or another, but let's see what goes on in 2019. In January, he immediately dropped a music video for the Blockboy JB featured track called Yusop, before then ending off his Europe-wide tour in February. And as soon as he got the chance, he would immediately pull up to Neptune Records to do an interview with Nardwuar, where he seemed very excited to meet him for the first time and had great energy, showing a lot of fans that he was still a very humble kid. He would then drop a couple tracks like Greet Her, Bust Down Cartier, as well as a track called Burberry Headband, which ended up being a sleeper hit and running up 20 million views on his own channel. But honestly, all of that was only a serving platter for what was to come, because as we already know, Little Mosey is more of a summertime artist. He really gets his biggest hits during that time, and a lot of people want to listen to that more easy breezy melodic music during that period. But what Mosey didn't realize is that he was going to be outstaged during the summer of 2019 because there was a new kid on the block known as Lil Tekk. And at first, Lil Mosey was actually a really big fan of Lil Tekk, supporting him by making a song with him before he blew up and telling everybody that he was going to be the next big thing. But unfortunately, due to a series of misunderstandings, they would eventually fall out, with their track getting leaked before it could come out and Lil Tekk blaming Little Mosey for that. Mosey was also removed from an Internet Money produced track and replaced with a Boogie with a Hoodie, so of course that made him a little bit more upset with Tekka. But I feel like another big factor that people don't talk about is probably jealousy as well, because in the summer of that year he would drop a music video on Lyrical Lemonade for his track Bust Down Cartier, which ended up getting 16 million views, which isn't bad by any means. But only a month later, Lil Tekk would drop his music video for Ransom, which was a massive smash hit, getting even bigger than Noticed and Kamikaze put together, sitting at over 400 million views and being the fourth biggest video to ever drop on Lyrical Lemonade. And of course, immediately after, Lil Mosey did seem supportive, but after all of that other stuff went down, he would start to feel a little bit bitter to Lil Tekk, feeling like he might be replacing him. And keep in mind, Lil Mosey was only like 17 years old at this point. He was doing drugs and he definitely had an inflated ego, so it would lead to the two of them falling out, but they would eventually come back together in 2021. If you want to know more about the beef, then check out my Lil Tekk video. I went more in depth there. But it's not like Lil Mosey was falling off by any means, because soon after that, he would drop a track with Chris Brown called G-Walk, before then performing at Rolling Loud and even getting an interview with the Cuff Boy's mom. As well as the biggest thing that happened to him that year, appearing on the XXL freshman list for 2019, where Lil Tekk didn't because he missed the cutoff date by about a week. So he did have that one thing to hold over Lil Tekk, but at the same time, his XXL cypher would end up being pretty embarrassing for him, with him not being able to freestyle whatsoever and putting out a very bad verse. He would talk about how he wasn't popping his in because it was killing him. He was talking about how he was the man. He was talking about how the beat was lame, trying to copy Kodak from 2016, and overall, he just put out a poor performance.
Goddamn, I feel like the man. Freshman of the year, I woke up like the man. Never popping Zans, cause they killing me, damn. Okay, this a lame ass beat.
Which wouldn't be that big of a deal if he was sitting at a lunchroom table with his friends, but unfortunately this was in front of half of the internet and everybody would start trolling and making fun of him online, which surprisingly he took pretty well. He would tell his fans that he wasn't very good at freestyling, and this was really one of the only times that he had done it in front of a large audience, but that wouldn't stop people from trolling him online, and even to this day, every time an XSL freshman cypher drops, people still talk about Lil Mosey waking up like the man. So yeah, for a couple weeks the entire internet was making fun of him, but luckily for him, he was able to laugh it off, and it wasn't near as bad as somebody like Little Xan or Little Skies, and he would use all this free publicity to hype up the release of his first official album called Certified Hitmaker. The lead single off that project, called Stuck in a Dream, featuring Gunna, going on to chart at number 62 on the Billboard Hot 100, which was pretty decent, as well as being his most viewed video on his personal YouTube channel. Although that really was the peak of the album, because none of the other tracks ended up charting, and the album itself only sold 23K first week, which isn't too bad. It's slightly better than his first mixtape, but it's definitely nothing nothing impressive. But just like a lot of his contemporaries in the SoundCloud wave, he really isn't the type of artist that can hold up an entire project on his own. He more so drops singles and music videos that do really well, but every time he puts out an album, it slightly underperforms. 6 9 is also like this, Little Xan, Little Sky, Smoke Perp, basically everybody in the SoundCloud wave is kind of similar, which is why I don't understand why we use albums as a gauge for if somebody fell off or not. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. We should more so look at their views online, but like a lot of people said in my comments in the Little Skies video, people can bot those as well. I'd like to think that they're not, but it is possible. He would then finally finish off the year 2019 by dropping a music video for his track Live This Wild, and then starting off the year 2020 by releasing a music video for the Trippie Redd featured track called Scared, which now both sit at 20 million views. So like I said, he was still doing well. That's definitely not fall off numbers by any means, and 2020 was about to be the biggest year for him ever, with him heading to New Zealand to do another tour before realizing that the show was canceled because the COVID-19 pandemic was starting to break out, which definitely hurt him in that way when it came to performing live. But there was a silver lining to all this, because one of his leaked tracks called Blueberry Faygo started doing numbers on TikTok, with his label trying to take it down time and time again. But before long, Mosey realized just how much potential the track had and decided to put it out professionally. And when he did eventually put it out, it would come alongside a music video on Lyrical Lemonade that had a cameo from the Kid Laroi, which went absolutely crazy, racking up 300 million views on the channel, as well as peaking at number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, meaning it was his biggest hit to date. 2 years after his initial wave, he was still able to put out songs that were bigger than anything he had done prior, and the summer of 2020 basically belonged to him. I remember hearing this track over and over and over again on the radio in 2020, and we're talking about the cowboy radio that I get all the way out here in Canada. So this track was so big that they were even playing it on the country stations. That's how big of a hit it actually was. So basically during the entire year of 2020, Mosey didn't have to drop too much music because he was eating so much off of this one hit that he could sit back and relax and enjoy his success. Although he would continue to drop songs like Back at It featuring Little Baby, Top Gun featuring Lune, and a deluxe version of Certified Hitmaker with 3 new tracks that now all sit at over 1 million views each. Soon after that, he would appear on the SpongeBob movie soundtrack with his song Krabby Step, which was definitely an embarrassing track as well as video, with the whole internet making fun of him, but after all, it probably was his label's idea, and I'm sure the movie studio cut him a decent enough check that it was worth the embarrassment from putting that track out, because after all, you know those movie studios are definitely paying the big bucks. And then after that, he would drop one more music video for his track Jumping Out the Face, ending off 2020 as one of the most successful years in his career ever. And you would think with all the momentum that he had leaving 2020, 2021 would be an even bigger year, with him teasing the release of his follow-up project to Certified Hitmaker called Project Universal. But before that would drop, he would start off the year by dropping a music video for his track Holy Water, which was actually shot in the UK, followed up by another music video for his track Enough, which both got 9 million views. He would then drop another music video for his track Try Me, which got 17 million views, giving him another big boost, before then appearing on a track called Jet Ski alongside Lil Tekk, produced by Internet Money, which of course was a big hit as well. And it seemed like Lil Mosey was getting ready to take over the summer of 2021 as well, but before he could do that in April, he was hit with one of the most gnarly cases I've ever seen in the mainstream rap game, because basically he was going to be charged in Washington state with rape. Yeah, that's right. Apparently there was an event that took place in early 2020 where he was at a party with a couple other people, and a girl got too inebriated, fell asleep, and then him and his 2 co-defendants ended up sleeping with her when she wasn't able to consent. And even worse than that, when they sent out the letter saying that Lil Mosey had to appear in court, they sent it to the wrong address, meaning that he never got it in the first place and missed out on his first court appearance, making him look even more guilty. And the story would only break online after he missed that first court case, meaning a lot of people thought that he was trying to avoid the case. And of course, with headlines that look that gnarly, people are immediately going to jump to conclusions, and basically everybody was flaming Lil Mosey online as well as in real life. He said every time he tried to walk down the street, people would start yelling shit at him, so he wasn't able to leave his house for a couple years. And this case would basically put his entire career on hold. He would drop a couple music videos throughout the year, but it seemed like his album was pushed off until a later date. He wasn't able to tour because of it, and he basically just sat inside waiting to see what would happen. Keep in mind he was only 21 years old when this all went down, and he was looking at life in prison if he was convicted, so basically if he lost, he was going to lose his entire life. And for the next couple years, everybody basically forgot about Lil Mosey. He stopped dropping music, he stopped appearing in the public eye, he completely cleared off his Instagram, which definitely was a smart move, even though it was probably hard for him to make. He wasn't able to defend himself publicly because if he did, he could jeopardize his entire case, and really at the time, I bet he wasn't really thinking about his career. He was probably only thinking about his life and how he might completely lose it over something he didn't do. But the one plus side to this entire thing is that Lil Mosey would get sober because he wanted to appear more professional to the judge, meaning that he fully got off of lean, Xans, and everything else that he was taking. And after 2 incredibly long years of fighting this case, in 2023, 2023, he was finally found not guilty on all charges and completely cleared, which definitely had to be a good feeling, but at the same time, he was left to pick up the pieces of his falling career, and there wasn't really a whole lot he could do. A lot of people had forgotten about him. A lot of people didn't want to hear anything from him because they already made the decision when the initial story came out. And of course, as much as the internet had to say when he was charged, they basically had nothing to say after the court case was over and he was found innocent on all charges. He would go on to do several interviews talking about the case and trying to clear his name, which has given him a little bit more attention in recent years, but he's definitely nowhere near the level that he used to be in 2020 and 2021. He has been teasing an upcoming mixtape called Love You Forever with a bunch of snippets where he's talking about being back in 2020 during the pandemic, trying to recapture that same moment that blew up Blueberry Faygo back in the day, but it's uncertain if he's going to be able to recapture that again. At this point, only time can tell if he's going to bounce back into the mainstream or if everybody's going to completely reject him just for having all that dirt on his name from the prior charge. But honestly, if anybody can do it, I feel like Lil Mosey can, because after all, he already had his two big hits in 2018, and then during 2019, he wasn't really as big, but then he was able to bounce back and become bigger than ever in 2020, so it's definitely possible that he can have a comeback. A lot of people seem to be really negative on that and say that his entire career is destroyed, but look at Lil Tekk, he had a somewhat comeback last year, and I definitely think that with this new generation embracing him and getting a couple good features, he can have a big time album that brings him back into the mainstream, or at least I hope so. It's gotta be really rough having everything you ever worked for in your life destroyed by something you didn't even do. I mean, there's a lot of artists out there who have done very terrible things. They never get outed, they never get called out, but Lil Mosey ends up getting charged for something they didn't do. The industry's broken, man. That's all I gotta say. Either way, guys, I gotta say shout out to Lil Mosey. He's definitely a trooper for making it through all that, and he makes some pretty decent music. So if you haven't heard of him in a while, definitely check out that new stuff and see if you're still a fan. His voice is changing, so it's slightly different than the stuff that he was putting out back then, but it's still pretty good. And with all that said, once again, shout out to my Patreons, Crusader Official, William Collins, and Liam Campbell. Big thank you to all my paid members, and if you want to join that club and get your name mentioned at the end of these videos, all you got to do is sign up for $1 a month. It really helps me out and makes sure that I can keep making these videos at the rapid rate that I am. And if you enjoyed the video and want to see more, I also have a second channel where I cover more drama-centric stuff. I do interviews on there too, as well as run a podcast. Right now, I'm covering the Zillakami story. I'm getting pretty tired of it, but if you want to hear more of that, go over there and check it out. Also, shout out to Knife Gang, subscribe to the channel, still trying to get to 20K. Appreciate you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.